Imagine a city where hope had vanished, where opportunities were as scarce as rain in the dry season. One abandoned stadium stood as a monument to broken promises, but one man dared to dream differently. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the visionary who turned a crumbling structure into 20,000 life-changing opportunities. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story like this. The stadium had been abandoned for decades, its concrete walls cracked and bleached under the relentless sun, a hollow monument to promises broken and dreams deferred. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the center, his gaze sweeping across the empty stands, imagining the roar of thousands of voices, the pulse of life he intended to inject into this lifeless shell. Around him, the wind carried whispers of doubt, voices from politicians and businessmen who laughed at the idea of transforming a crumbling arena into a beacon of hope. They called it impossible, foolish, a venture destined for failure. Yet in the shadow of their mockery, Traoré's mind was already alive with possibilities. Visions of a different Burkina Faso, one where opportunity didn't trickle from distant capitals but flowed directly into the hands of the people. He traced the jagged cracks with his eyes, seeing them not as destruction but as potential, as if the stadium itself were waiting for his touch to breathe again. Around him, shadows flickered, workers carrying tools, engineers measuring every inch, curious citizens peeking from behind walls. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but also an unfamiliar thrill. The world thought he was alone, that his mission was reckless, but Traoré knew something they didn't. Change began where doubt thrived, and he thrived on the impossible. Rumors had already begun circulating. Corrupt officials whispered among themselves in dim offices, plotting how to halt the project before it gained momentum. Rival businessmen hired fixers to survey the site, trying to uncover weaknesses, to find a chink in Traoré's resolve. He had heard the stories: a scaffold loosened at midnight, a shipment of materials mysteriously delayed, threats left in cryptic messages at the site. But rather than intimidate him, each act of sabotage sharpened his focus. Every attempt to obstruct only fueled his determination, and with every obstacle, the people watching from the surrounding neighborhoods grew more invested in his plan. Traoré's mind drifted to the families waiting for relief, to the mothers who had given up hope for stable work, to young men and women wandering the streets with no prospects, their potential wasted in silence. He had grown up in a country where survival was a daily struggle, where hunger and poverty shaped lives more than education or dreams. And yet, as he stood among the ruins of the stadium, he imagined a future where these people would not merely survive, they would thrive. 20,000 jobs, he thought, 20,000 lives transformed by a single vision. The enormity of the task pressed down on him, but he had long since learned to carry burdens heavier than this. Then there were the shadows at the edges of his awareness, figures who watched without revealing themselves, whose intentions were cloaked in mystery. Traoré had learned to read the silence, to feel the tension in the air like a storm brewing beyond the horizon. Allies could appear from unexpected corners, and enemies lurked in plain sight. He understood that every step forward would be a negotiation with uncertainty itself, a delicate balance between trust and vigilance. And yet, despite the danger, despite the whispers of sabotage and the laughter of skeptics, a strange quiet settled over him. The empty stadium became a stage, the cracked concrete a canvas for something unprecedented. The city around him had forgotten how to hope, but Traoré refused to forget. In his mind, he saw the stands filled with cheering families, the grounds bustling with workers, the surrounding streets humming with the energy of renewed purpose. He imagined the first day of employment, the first salaries paid, the first smiles restored, and just as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the stadium floor, Traoré allowed himself a brief, rare smile. The world thought he was reckless, that he was chasing a dream too vast for a single man to accomplish. But the truth was different. He had a plan, a spark, and an unwavering belief that one man's vision could ignite a nation. What he did next would change Burkina Faso forever. As the first beams of sunlight pierced the horizon, illuminating the stadium's fractured walls, Ibrahim Traoré set into motion the plan that would become the heartbeat of an entire city. Workers began to arrive, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. Men who had spent years idling in unemployment, women who had scavenged to feed their families, young people who had long since abandoned dreams of stability. They all looked to Traoré as something more than a leader. He was a symbol that change might actually be possible. Word of the project spread quickly, carried on the whispers of street vendors, school children, and community elders. Traoré had cultivated an aura of quiet authority, a reputation forged from past victories and relentless perseverance. His rise had not been without struggle. The memory of earlier battles, political skirmishes, and campaigns where he had been underestimated burned in his mind. Every setback had taught him that vision alone was not enough. It required patience, strategy, and an unshakable will. The stadium itself became a microcosm of the nation's struggles. Corrupt officials lingered in nearby offices, their conversations heavy with disdain. They sneered at Traoré's ambition, dismissed the project as a folly of idealism. Businessmen with vested interests in other ventures monitored the site like hawks, ready to intervene if the project threatened their profit. Rumors of sabotage circulated. Missing shipments, mysterious equipment malfunctions, sudden resignations of key staff. Traoré met each challenge with calm determination, studying the patterns, reading between the lines, and anticipating the next move of his unseen adversaries. Amidst the tension, the ordinary people began to believe. Mothers who had long gone without stable work now carried hope in their eyes. Fathers whispered to their children about a future that no longer seemed unattainable. Neighborhoods surrounding the stadium buzzed with energy as volunteers lent their hands, eager to contribute to something that could redefine their lives. Traoré had understood early on that the project's success did not rest solely on concrete and steel. It relied on the faith and courage of the people themselves. Yet the shadows loomed. 3 generals, influential figures in Burkina Faso's political landscape, viewed the stadium not as a beacon of progress, but as a threat to their control. They circulated secret memos, convened in hidden rooms, and plotted to undermine Traoré's initiative. Their tactics were subtle: delays in permits, coercion of suppliers, clandestine inspections. Each move was calculated to sow doubt and fear. But for every attempt to weaken him, Traoré responded with ingenuity, turning obstacles into lessons and tension into motivation. At night, alone in his modest office overlooking the unfinished stadium, Traoré would walk among blueprints, notes, and sketches. He studied every beam, every stairway, every corridor, imagining how the finished structure would hum with life. He considered the lives it would touch, the street vendors setting up near entrances, children learning teamwork through sports, craftsmen finding consistent employment. The stadium was more than bricks and mortar. It was a promise, a radical act of creation in a world that often seemed indifferent to hope. Mysterious occurrences added a layer of suspense. Tools would vanish, suspicious figures lurked near the construction site, and anonymous notes hinted at hidden enemies. Traoré could have seen these as threats, as reasons to retreat. Instead, he treated them as signals, subtle clues revealing the web of resistance surrounding him. He learned to trust intuition and observation, to read human behavior with an almost uncanny precision. Allies appeared from unexpected corners: an engineer who had once been skeptical, a former government clerk with insider knowledge, a local activist who knew how to rally communities. Together, they formed an unorthodox coalition, united by faith in Traoré's vision. The magnitude of the challenge became clear as construction progressed. The stadium's skeleton rose like a monument of defiance, yet every day brought new crises. Equipment breakdowns threatened schedules, sudden storms tested structures, and whispers of political interference spread through the workforce. Traoré's leadership was tested not just by external forces but by internal pressures: doubt among his team, the weight of expectations, and the knowledge that failure could ripple across the lives of thousands. And yet, for all the obstacles, a quiet determination pervaded the site. The city watched as ordinary citizens became builders of their own future. Conversations among neighbors shifted from despair to strategies, from complaints to collaboration. The project had begun to inspire not only hope, but ingenuity. Traoré's vision was contagious. The energy surrounding the stadium became impossible to ignore. As night fell, the lights of the partially completed structure glimmered against the dark sky. Traoré stood at the highest vantage point, surveying the site and the city beyond. The path ahead was perilous, filled with mystery, intrigue, and the ever-present threat of sabotage. Yet in that moment, he felt the pulse of possibility, a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the people around him. One man, one stadium, one vision, he was ready to turn it into a force capable of changing lives forever. The stadium's skeleton now loomed like a shadow over the city, a reminder of what was at stake. Construction had begun in earnest, but with progress came danger. Mysterious accidents occurred almost daily. Scaffolding collapsed under suspicious circumstances. Shipments of steel were delayed by unseen hands, and vital machinery broke down at the most inopportune moments. Each disruption threatened to halt the project entirely, yet Traoré refused to be shaken. He walked the site daily, eyes scanning every corner, listening for whispers in the wind, reading the subtle cues of human behavior that revealed hidden agendas. It soon became clear that the opposition had grown more organized. The three generals, once distant shadows of influence, now coordinated a campaign of quiet sabotage. Engineers who had been loyal began to waver under pressure. Contractors received bribes to delay work, and a subtle fear began to seep through the workforce. Traoré confronted these challenges not with anger, but with a strategy that combined cunning and patience. Every threat became a test of his ability to turn adversity into momentum. The ordinary people, meanwhile, bore the brunt of the uncertainty. Families who had pinned their hopes on the stadium faced growing anxiety. Mothers whispered about rent, fathers fretted over debts, and young men and women who had dreamed of jobs now feared they would be disappointed yet again. Traoré knew he carried more than blueprints. He carried the weight of thousands of dreams. Each day he navigated political interference, clandestine sabotage, and the ever-present shadow of betrayal. Often walking alone through the corridors of the unfinished stadium at night, feeling both the thrill and the fear of what he was undertaking. Among the workforce, subtle alliances emerged. An engineer once loyal to the generals became Traoré's confidant, feeding him insider knowledge about sabotage plans and hidden motives. A local activist organized volunteers to repair damaged sections of the stadium overnight, turning setbacks into opportunities for community engagement. Even shadowy figures who had appeared suspiciously at the site slowly revealed themselves as covert allies. Each revelation added layers to the story, a delicate web of loyalty and risk, keeping Traoré on edge while fortifying his strategy. The generals escalated their tactics. Rumors spread through the city, questioning Traoré's competence and painting the stadium project as a futile venture. Key supply chains were disrupted, forcing Traoré to improvise solutions with limited resources. In one tense episode, a shipment of steel beams never arrived. The workers waited in despair, and the generals celebrated their apparent victory from afar. Traoré, however, had anticipated such moves, having secretly secured alternative suppliers and transported materials undercover. The city had begun to notice the resilience of the project, a stubborn refusal to succumb to pressure, and murmurs of admiration mixed with astonishment. As the weeks passed, the stakes grew even higher. Rival factions attempted to infiltrate the workforce, planting spies to sow discord and collect intelligence. Some workers were coerced to abandon their posts, and Traoré faced the difficult choice of whether to confront betrayal directly or rely on subtle observation to uncover the truth. Every decision carried weight. Every misstep could unravel months of progress. The tension became almost tangible, a slow-burning pressure that gripped the city and the construction site alike. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens began contributing in unexpected ways. Street vendors provided meals to workers. Mechanics offered equipment repairs at no cost. Youth organized to assist with laborious tasks that required hands rather than expertise. The project had become a unifying force, a symbol of what collective effort could achieve even under the shadow of intrigue and sabotage. Traoré recognized the importance of this energy and nurtured it, knowing that the heart of the project wasn't just the structure itself, but the community rallying behind it. The climax of rising tension came during a particularly stormy night. Heavy rains threatened to collapse partially built sections, while rumors of a major sabotage attempt circulated through the workforce. Traoré moved like a general on a battlefield, coordinating teams to reinforce vulnerable points, checking each scaffold, each girder, each cable. Outside the stadium, mysterious figures loitered in the darkness, their intentions unclear. Every second counted, and for the first time, the full magnitude of the opposition became visible, a shadowy, relentless force determined to halt progress at all costs. Yet through the chaos, Traoré remained resolute. He had cultivated trust, foresight, and a network of loyal allies who could act swiftly when danger appeared. Every challenge was met with ingenuity. Temporary structures, alternative supply routes, and the quiet but effective manipulation of political influence to counteract the general's schemes. Ordinary citizens cheered quietly from the sidelines, their faith growing with each obstacle overcome. The stadium, once abandoned and lifeless, had begun to pulse with energy and possibility, even amidst the growing storm of betrayal and sabotage. By the end of the act, the stadium stood taller than before, scarred but resilient. Traoré had weathered sabotage, distrust, and unforeseen calamities, turning threats into opportunities. The city watched, breath held, as he walked among the workers, signaling both resolve and hope. He knew that the ultimate test, the true climax, was still ahead. A final challenge would come, one that could destroy everything he had built or transform the stadium and the lives of thousands forever. And though the danger loomed closer than ever, the heartbeat of possibility grew stronger with each passing moment. The stadium stood on the edge of completion, a steel and concrete skeleton now alive with potential. But the final stretch had become a battlefield. The three generals had escalated their interference into something more daring, more perilous. Late one evening, as shadows stretched across the construction site, rumors circulated of a coordinated sabotage attempt, a plan designed to collapse the stadium and crush not only the project, but the morale of the city. Traoré knew this was the ultimate test, the moment where months of vision, planning, and perseverance would either triumph or unravel in an instant. He moved through the site with unwavering focus, his presence a calm center amid chaos. Workers whispered about strange sightings, figures slipping through scaffolds, tools disappearing, and materials tampered with in the dead of night. Yet for every act of sabotage, Traoré had prepared a countermeasure. He had anticipated the general's tactics, and his foresight had positioned allies at every critical point. Engineers monitored structural integrity with painstaking care, volunteers repaired damaged areas immediately, and loyal workers refused to yield to fear. Every step, every gesture, was choreographed with precision. Yet the tension was suffocating, as if the very air was charged with the threat of disaster. The first wave of sabotage struck under the cover of a sudden storm. Heavy rains lashed the stadium, water pooling around unfinished foundations. Key scaffolding threatened to collapse, and a shipment of precast materials was discovered tampered with, edges cracked, and rust spreading along metal beams. Traoré sprang into action, directing teams to secure the structure, improvising solutions with ingenuity that left even his most loyal allies in awe. He climbed scaffolds, adjusted cranes, and coordinated repairs while rain poured, refusing to let fear dictate his movements. Amid the chaos, the general's schemes became more audacious. They had infiltrated the workforce, planting spies to mislead teams, creating confusion, and attempting to manipulate supplies. Traoré, however, anticipated deception, reading the subtle tells of hesitation and overeagerness among his workers. He exposed the infiltrators discreetly, reassigning them to non-critical tasks, all while keeping morale high. The workers, inspired by his courage, responded with a loyalty and determination that bordered on the heroic. Every obstacle the generals threw at the project became a stage for ingenuity, a test of strategy, and a demonstration of human resilience. As night deepened, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the skeletal towers of the stadium, casting long, menacing shadows. Traoré coordinated the final reinforcements, temporary bracing, emergency lighting, and secure storage for vulnerable materials. Sweat mixed with rain on his brow, his hands calloused from climbing beams and tightening bolts, yet his eyes never wavered from the vision of the completed stadium. He moved with the precision of a general, the determination of a visionary, and the courage of someone who knew the stakes were higher than personal ambition. The climax reached its apex when a massive scaffold, tampered with to collapse under weight, began to buckle. Traoré raced toward it, signaling workers to stabilize it, and with the help of volunteers, held it in place until temporary supports could be erected. Every second felt like an eternity. The storm's roar, the strain of the structure, and the tension of the conspirators' hidden efforts combined into a moment where failure seemed almost inevitable. Yet he did not flinch. Every decision, every action was decisive, as if the fate of thousands of lives hung in the balance, and it did. Finally, the storm subsided, leaving the stadium scarred but standing. The conspiracies of the generals had been outmaneuvered, the sabotage attempts nullified, and the workforce rallied behind Traoré's unyielding resolve. The lights of the nearly completed stadium glimmered in the early dawn, reflecting a labor of courage, vision, and collective effort. For the first time, the city could see what months of struggle had produced, a monument not only of steel and concrete, but of human determination and hope. Traoré stood atop the highest point, rain-soaked and exhausted, yet triumphant. He surveyed the workers below, engineers, volunteers, mothers and fathers, young men and women, who had poured their energy, skill and hope into the project. 20,000 opportunities, countless lives transformed, and a city reminded that even in the face of treachery, adversity, and overwhelming odds, vision coupled with courage could prevail, and as the sun rose over the horizon, bathing the stadium in golden light, the whispers of doubt vanished. The conspirators were exposed, their schemes unraveled, and the impossible had been made real. Traoré had not only completed a stadium, he had forged a symbol, a testament to what leadership, resilience, and community could achieve when united against darkness. The stadium, once a derelict shell of despair, now pulsed with life. Its concrete bones had been transformed into a structure of hope, a living monument to possibility, and every corner of the city seemed to resonate with the echoes of what had been achieved. Ibrahim Traoré walked through the bustling grounds, watching as workers, families, and neighbors navigated the space he had envisioned. 20,000 lives had found opportunity here, jobs that had once seemed unattainable, incomes that restored dignity, and a sense of purpose that rippled through streets and households alike. Children played on the manicured fields, their laughter a melody of renewed hope. Street vendors set up near entrances, their small businesses thriving on the steady flow of people. Young apprentices learned construction and engineering skills from veterans who had worked alongside Traoré from the beginning. Mothers and fathers who had once feared an uncertain tomorrow now moved with confidence, salaries in hand, futures no longer dictated by desperation. The city, once muted by hardship, thrummed with energy. Traoré's triumph extended beyond the stadium's walls. The shadowy conspirators who had tried to halt progress were exposed, their influence diminished. Corrupt officials and rival businessmen were forced to reckon with a project that had not only succeeded, but had become indispensable to the city's livelihood. Hidden allies who had quietly supported the vision were revealed, their contributions celebrated, adding layers of mystery and intrigue to the narrative. The story of sabotage, espionage, and quiet heroism became part of the city's folklore, inspiring those who had once felt powerless. As the days passed, the impact of the stadium rippled across the nation. Neighboring towns and cities began to replicate the model, seeing how a single visionary project could ignite economic revival. News of the initiative spread beyond borders, painting Burkina Faso as a place where resilience, ingenuity, and bold leadership could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Traoré had become more than a leader. He was a symbol of what could be achieved when courage and vision aligned with the will of the people. At night, he often returned to the stadium's highest vantage point, watching lights twinkle across the city. Memories of every challenge, the threats, the sabotage, the near failures, surfaced in his mind, each obstacle now a testament to perseverance. The stadium had been more than a construction project. It had been a crucible, forging community, resilience, and determination. The city below was a living proof that change could be made real when one person dared to act despite the odds. Traoré reflected on the people whose lives had been touched directly. A young man now learning carpentry skills that would ensure employment for years, a single mother who could finally provide for her children without fear, neighbors who had found purpose and pride through collective effort. These were the true markers of success, far beyond any political accolade or recognition. His vision had become reality, not because of power or influence, but because he had dared to imagine what others deemed impossible, and because he had inspired a community to believe alongside him. And yet, there remained a sense of quiet anticipation. The mysteries, the shadowy forces, the lessons learned from betrayal. They lingered as reminders that vigilance, courage, and creativity were never-ending pursuits. Traoré understood that one victory, no matter how monumental, was but a chapter in the ongoing story of a nation striving toward prosperity. The stadium stood as both a conclusion and a beginning, a beacon of hope, a challenge to future leaders, and a testament to human resilience. As the sun rose over the city, casting golden light across the stadium's gleaming surfaces, Traoré paused and looked toward the horizon. He thought of every family transformed, every dream reignited, every challenge overcome. In that moment, the question lingered in the air, unspoken yet palpable. Could one vision truly ignite an entire nation? The answer, he realized, had already been written in the lives now thriving around him. Burkina Faso had risen, not through force nor fortune, but through the audacity of imagination, courage, and unwavering belief in what was possible. And in that quiet, triumphant dawn, Ibrahim Traoré allowed himself the rarest of smiles. The stadium was complete, the people empowered, and the city alive with hope. A single vision had indeed created 20,000 opportunities, and in doing so had begun to reshape the destiny of an entire nation.